Well, it's time now for a look at what's making the headlines in the international papers. And for that, I'm joined by Katarina Vitozzi, our press reviewer. Hello, Katarina.
Hello.
So those ongoing peace talks in Norway that we mentioned in our news bulletin are going on between the Colombian government and FARC rebels. And that's made some of the headlines today.
Absolutely. Headlines, but also some editorial comments as well on those ongoing peace talks, as you say. The International Herald Tribune, very interestingly, they remind us why these talks are so important. They sent reporters to the Cacao region in Colombia, talking to people who've been caught in the crossfire of this war, which has been going on for decades. They remind us it's the longest running war in the Western Hemisphere. They speak to an 11-year-old girl who's grown up with this. You know, she's grown up with the sound of gunfire, pitched street battles between government troops and rebel fighters. The piece also asks a very interesting question. You know, after decades of fighting like this, how easy is it going to be for Colombians to sort of reintegrate these rebels back into society? So it's not just a question of, let's cross our fingers and hope peace talks go well in Oslo, but, how is this actually going to work out on the ground within the communities that have been living with this sort of violence? It does point out that although there have obviously been atrocities on both sides, people there, according to the International Herald Tribune, do seem to blame the FARC rebels for most of the violence. That is certainly the sense you get from an editorial piece in the Colombian journal Colombia Reports. They've really blasted the first day of these talks in terms of comments made by the FARC chief negotiator. They call them the pantomime villains of Oslo. They say that although the FARC rebels had gone into this talk saying we're going to be open, we're ready for a peace accord, they say it's actually got off on the worst possible foot, particularly calling out the rebel leader who said the Colombian government are a corrupt oligarchy, they're puppets of the Washington government. Is this them seeking justification for the fight in Colombia? This is what the piece asks. Maybe could this perhaps has struck a chord with some people in Colombia. However, it says has got off on the wrong foot, have got more days to perhaps resolve this and really finally strike a deal for enduring peace in Colombia.
OK, well, we're going to move back to Europe now because you've been looking at how the Greek papers have reacted to the news from that EU summit in Brussels.
Yeah, not as much reaction in the papers. Well, as you can guess, this discussions went on very late into the night in Brussels. So let's have a look at the front page of Ethnos. They talk about the white smoke of an accord. This, of course, is the decision to have a banking supervisor looking over all of the Eurozone banks. Of course, Greece itself isn't an official issue at this talks, but, how could you forget that this is an issue and it's a country that's going to be directly affected by what's being discussed here? Certainly, if you look at the front pages of other Greek papers, like Katemerini, these are showing photographs of the millions of protesters that took to the streets. They had a day of general strikes and protests in Athens yesterday. The paper notes, along with Rizos Pastis, that these were generally peaceful protests. In some instances, there were clashes between a few protesters and police. Important to note, however, maybe not as much coverage as you would think in Greek papers, because Greek journalists were actually on strike as well yesterday.
I see. OK, well, let's move on now to a British newspaper, The Independent. They've got an exclusive today reporting on a discovery which they say could solve the energy crisis.
Indeed. Now, get your science hat on, Lorna, because scientists in Northern England have discovered a way to make fresh air into petrol. I'm pausing for your stunned reaction.
Sounds a little bit like lead into gold.
Well, no. Apparently, this is exactly what they pick up at The Independent. Say you would have thought this was an impossible feat, but it is possible. Simplifying things maybe a little bit with the diagram given to us by The Independent. They're extracting carbon dioxide from the air and hydrogen from water, mix that together, and you have petrol. Only 5 litres of petrol has actually been extracted so far. But in 2 years' time, the scientists promise us there will be petrol for all and carbon neutral and very good for the environment.
Wow, it sounds amazing if true. We'll keep an eye on that. But finally, papers worldwide, as well as here in France, talking about the death of the Dutch actress Sylvia Christel.
Yes, better known to many perhaps as Emmanuel, star of that iconic film from the 1970s, the first erotic film to enter mainstream cinema. We've seen papers in Australia, in America, all talking about her. I'd like to just, if we can, look at a last photo, perhaps in the Daily Mail. This newspaper was, although you've seen their beautiful pictures of her from her youth, she died yesterday at age 60 after a long battle of cancer. That one of the last photographs to be seen of her in public.
Okay, well. Well, thank you very much indeed, Katharina, for that look at the international papers.